Hi, welcome back to Books and Chokers on YouTube and Elle McNicoll's lockdown writing class session number 10. We're 10 sessions in. I can't quite believe it. Thank you for everyone for sticking with it, and if you're doing the work, incredible. If you're dropping in and out, that's fine too. If this is your first session, hello. So today we're going to be talking about show, don't tell. And actually, I want to maybe change it to show and tell, because what I'm referring to when I say show, don't tell is a very common writing rule that is used a lot in writing classes, in creative writing degrees and courses, and I've never done an MA in creative writing, but I think this is quite common in them as well. And it's a rule because what they're saying when they say show, don't tell is find ways in your writing to show what's happening rather than to just outright say what it is. But the reason why I want to say show and tell is because sometimes I think a tell is perfectly acceptable. And I'm not a big fan of rules. We talked about this a little before. I'm not a big fan of gatekeeping and rules. I think whatever works for you is the best way. So I'm going to say maybe show and tell rather than show, don't tell. But what do we mean when we say show and tell? Well, so you have a scene, let's say, in your book, whatever that is, and there's two characters, and one character is very, very upset. Now, your job as the writer, as this is part of the story, is to convey that the character is upset to the reader. Maybe we're in the character's head, maybe it's first person, but if we're not, if we're writing in third person, how are you going to convey to the reader that this character is upset? What are you going to do? Are you going to say, what should we give them? What name should we give them? Let's call them Jane. Are we going to say, Jane walked into the room and was clearly upset? That is totally acceptable, but that is a tell. We are outwardly and without any disguise, we're telling the reader what's happening. But if we were going to show that, how would we do that? Well, it depends on Jane's character, but if we've been, doing all this character work we talked about, it might be easier to do this. So maybe Jane goes to the kitchen counter and she's meant to be chopping vegetables, and she picks up a knife and she slams the knife down into the carrots, and she's dicing the carrots with this aggressive force, and maybe she starts chopping an onion to cover up the fact that she's maybe crying a little bit. All of these things we could use to describe what's happening. We could say Jane chopped carrots fiercely and then moved to an onion in order to cover up the fact that she was crying. That's showing. That's showing the reader that somebody is upset rather than telling them. And the reason why I want to bring it up is because it's a good rule to be aware of. I know I said I don't like rules, and I don't. I really don't. I think what works best for you is what works best for you and your voice. But knowing that rule can be really, really helpful, because sometimes when you're doing a first draft, and I'm doing this right now with what I hope is going to be my third middle grade, is that you're busy getting all of the plot down and you're getting all the story down, like we talked about in the last couple of sessions. And sometimes you can get in your own way and forget that you're a writer and that you can write interesting things and not just write down plot. So sometimes I like to just check in with myself and go, am I telling too much here? Am I telling things in a way that's too obvious, and should I reel it back and start trying to show things again? So let's see, what's an example in a kind of spark? So if you've read a kind of spark, there is a scene with the two sisters, Addie's older sisters, Kitty and Nina, and they're arguing. The fact that they're arguing is already a bit of a tell. Or a show, actually, because they're, it doesn't say my sisters were angry, or it just says they're arguing. And Kitty, one of the sisters, is slamming drawers. She's slamming drawers in the kitchen because that's where they're arguing, and that's a way of showing that the argument has escalated to quite a deep level. And Addie, who's the narrator, who's not involved in the argument but who can hear it, says that she hasn't heard her sister raised her voice like this before. And that is just a way of showing that there's an argument going on and that there's animosity rather than telling. It's a really good, again, I don't like to say rule, but it's good to check in and just think, can I show something here instead of tell? Can I have the characters show how they're feeling instead of just telling the reader? It's a really good, nifty trick rather than a rule, I would say, to remember. So And it also goes into something called subtext, which I know your English teachers will probably have told you about, but subtext is the hidden meaning underneath the text. So somebody might say, I'm fine, but depending on how they say that, the subtext could be different. Maybe the subtext is, I'm not fine, which most of the time it is, in which case what they mean is different from what they're saying. This goes into something that I call cover and substance. This is just a lot of writing tricks, I would say, rather than rules that you can incorporate into your work, because I know that we're starting to work on those stories now, hopefully. Cover and substance is when somebody has the substance, as in the thing that they are feeling, the thing that they are experiencing, and then there's the cover, the thing that they're putting on top of it so that nobody notices what's really going on. So a good example of that is anger. Anger is almost always a cover. Anger is always covering something else. So the substance might be shame, it might be embarrassment, it might be hurt, it might be grief, which is definitely something that happens in show. One of the characters has lost somebody, and then they cover up their grief with a lot of other things. So the substance, which is what's really going on in the character, like I said, could be embarrassment, could be grief, could be shame, but the cover of that substance, the thing that they use to disguise that feeling, is anger. Anger is almost always covering something else. When you see somebody and they're very angry, our reaction sometimes is to be, why are they so angry? That's so annoying. Like, they're being rude and obnoxious, and that's rubbish. But actually, if we're going to be empathetic, and if you're going to be like a writer and try and think about what's really going on, there's something else happening underneath that anger. Usually something a lot more deeper and a lot more complicated. So it's good as well to think about, when you're showing and not telling, or telling and not showing, to think about your character's subtext. Are they telling the truth or about how they feel, or are they covering it up? What is their substance of what they're feeling? So in A Kind of Spark, Addie feels absolute betrayal and upset and devastation when Audrey, her friend, tells her that she doesn't like sharks. And there's a whole deeper meaning behind it, but I won't give that away. But, at a later point in the book, Audrey, Addie's friend, says, I don't like sharks the way that you like sharks. I don't think that they're cool the way you think they're cool. And Addie finds that sad and hurtful, and she feels devastated. That's her substance. She covers it up with, apathy and with indifference, and she just pretends it doesn't bother her, pretends it doesn't bother her at all. She goes to the librarian and says, get me, a book on anything but sharks. So she reacts in a way that on the outside would not, tell the whole story. It's a really interesting thing to think about when you're writing, and it can add a deeper layer to your characters. Cover and substance. Their substance could be protectiveness, and then the cover could be fear. That there's all kinds of things going on in cover and substance, and it's something that I like to think about, particularly when I'm writing adult characters. I know I'm technically an adult, but I don't feel like it. But it's important to think about, because not everybody wears their emotions on their sleeves. And if you want to write compelling characters with, maybe you want to trick the audience a little bit and have, a twist villain or something, then cover and substance is an amazing way to do it, which all stems from subtext and show, don't tell. This is a very technical lesson, but I thought that, we've had some fun ones, so we could have a really kind of technical one now. So that's what I want you to think about. I want you to now, if you want, write a paragraph, and I'm going to give you the subtext of what you're going to write about in the paragraph, but you cannot use these words. You cannot use these words. We're going to show and not tell. We're going to think about subtext, and we're going to think about cover and substance. So the words are, I am afraid. So whichever character you choose, maybe it's your narrator, maybe it's your protagonist, maybe whoever it is, I am afraid. And I want you to write a paragraph that lets the reader know that that is how the character is feeling, without the character ever saying those words. They never say, I'm scared, or I'm afraid, or this is frightening. They have to convey that in another way. Because in the real world, people don't usually say what they're really feeling. Again, it's cover and substance. We cover things up. So, I am afraid. And I want you to write a paragraph about that character, letting the reader know. The reader would read your paragraph and go, oh, this character's afraid. But you cannot say, I am afraid. We're going to show and not tell. Okay? Great. Looking forward to reading some of those. So, this week's book, I was thinking about Show Don't Tell, which is a difficult week to pick a book for, but I decided on Nevermore by Jessica Townsend, a fantastic first edition in a fantasy series. If you like Harry Potter and The Worst Witch and all kinds of fun stuff, or Pages and Co., you'll love this. And I was thinking about Show Don't Tell in this because there's a scene early on in Nevermore. The main character, Morgan Crow, is cursed. She believes she's cursed to die on her 13th birthday. That's what everyone expects. Or her 11th birthday, sorry. And that's what everybody expects, that she will die on her 11th birthday. A little bit grim, but don't worry. That's at the very beginning of the novel, so of course we know it's not going to happen. And there's her father's a very unfeeling character in the beginning, and she has a stepmother. And on the night where they're all expecting it to be her last night, her last night on Earth, her stepmother decides to tell everybody that she is going to have a baby. And this is a fantastic example of show don't tell, because what Jessica's done there, she hasn't told us much about the stepmother's character, but the fact that the stepmother is willing to tell everybody on the night that Morgan is expected to die that she's going to have a baby, thereby replacing Morgan, tells us a lot about what we need to know about her character. And her father's reaction as well tells us what we need to know about him. It's a really specific example that came right in my head when I thought, how can we show a character for being selfish and not very nice without saying that they're selfish and not very nice? And Morgan's stepmother in the beginning of Nevermore is a really good example. So if you love a good fantasy, I really recommend Nevermore by Jessica Townsend. And finally, the bookshop I want to recommend this week is Chicken and Frog, who are fantastic. You might have seen them on the news, talking about bookshops in lockdown. They are great. I can't wait to visit when this is safer and over. And I really, really enjoy them. So thank you for tuning in this week for cover and substance and subtext and show don't tell. I know it's a lot and it's a little bit complex, but it really does help when you're writing. It's something that I'm very consciously aware of right now that I'm on a first draft. I'm like, okay, we can't just list things like their stage directions. We have to add in a little bit of flair and a little bit of depth and a bit of extra meaning here and there, and we have to examine people's motives and the way their behavior, is conveyed to the outside world. It really does help to think about that. So have a think, and remember, your assignment is, your character is thinking and feeling, I am afraid. And you have to convey that in a way that is not obvious. And I really can't wait to see how you do it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you on Friday, where we're going to be discussing dialogue, which is going to be fun. All right, thank you. Bye-bye, guys.